Okay, thank you, Jesse. Good afternoon to everyone, and will the secretary please advise when a quorum is present?
A quorum is present.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to convene this meeting of the Board of Trustees. A reminder to everyone that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed for the public by WOSU. We are once again meeting virtually to comply with orders by Governor DeWine and the university related to limiting in-person gatherings to 10 or fewer. We're also following the guidance outlined by the Ohio Attorney General's office, which permits public meetings to be held virtually during this time of emergency. So thank you all for your flexibility. Our first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the board's August meetings, which were distributed to all trustees. If there are no additions or corrections, the minutes are approved as distributed. Thank you. At this time, I would like to recognize and welcome members of our university community who have asked to speak this afternoon about their experiences related to the Richard Strauss issue. Welcome and thank you again for joining us. We are grateful for your willingness to speak here today, and we remain thankful to all of those who have shared their experiences with this board and as part of the independent investigation of Strauss's abuse that concluded in 2019. After the investigation report was released, the university established a task force on sexual abuse. The task force recently completed its work. The group consulted with national experts to identify best practices for encouraging the reporting of sexual misconduct, for providing effective follow-up on college campuses, and for supporting survivors. The university has made the task force full report available to the public on the Strauss investigation website. Today, the board is here to listen. As you know, we are unable to engage in dialogue at this time because of the ongoing mediation and litigation. We want you to know, however, that you are being heard. Additionally, we will distribute to the members of the board the video we just received that features comments from additional survivors who wanted us to be aware of their experiences. Before we begin our 30-minute session, I would ask President Johnson, please, to say a few words.
Thank you, Chairman Heminger. I want to start by extending my welcome to all of you. You are alumni of this university, members of the Buckeye family, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to see you and hear you. I reviewed the findings of the independent investigation that the university initiated into the abuse perpetrated by Richard Strauss. I also understand that you submitted a video this afternoon, and I want to assure you that I will watch it. I also want you to know that you are alumni of this university, members of the Buckeye family, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to see you and hear you. And also on behalf of the entire Ohio State University, that I'm deeply sorry for what you have been through. What Richard Strauss did is reprehensible, and the university's failure to act at the time is totally unacceptable. I know that Ohio State has worked hard to address the wrongs of the past since initiating the independent investigation. We are unable to engage in dialogue at this time, but I want you to know that I'm listening. You should also know that despite the virtual setting for this meeting, confidential support resources are available to anyone who may need them today. We're sharing a screenshot now with contact information should anyone wish to access these resources. Representatives from the Sexual Assault Response Network of Central Ohio are available to have confidential conversations, either in a Zoom meeting with a waiting room for privacy or over the phone. We'll share this information again at the end of the session. And for all the survivors of Strauss's abuse, as well as their families, counseling and treatment are still available to you at no cost for as long as needed. This is offered independently through Presidium, and no contact with the university is required. The information for connecting with Presidium is being shared as well. Again, thank you so much for being here today, and at this time, we welcome your remarks.
Can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure before I start. Can somebody acknowledge you can hear me? I'm sorry. Shaking my head. Okay, you can hear. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm kind of nervous. I understand why many of us are nervous to stand here and sit in front of you and talk, because speaking to the university and its leaders about what we continue to go through and have gone through for 3 years, going on 3 years now, it's like standing up to a bully. And it shouldn't be. We should be on the same side. I'm one of the many survivors of Dr. Richard Strauss, and I'm a victim of OSU's decades-long cover-up of his abuse. It may make you very uncomfortable to hear what I'm here to say today, and it should, because I'm not afraid to hold up a mirror and let the public see what's happening under your direction behind the scenes. I want you to understand how OSU's choices, the board's, your choices today, right now, are re-traumatizing me and other survivors, and you're very dismissive of our hopes that no other students will ever suffer again the way we continue to. Your actions and what you failed to do are paving the way for this kind of abuse to happen again, and I really hope you hear that. That's the most important part to understand. I'm going on almost my third Thanksgiving since all this started. 2 Christmases, 2 New Years have gone by waiting for OSU to take some kind of meaningful action for survivors and all the current students that you're in charge of now. I retired from the Army. I've served since 1988, retired. We've lived through a pandemic, and here we sit. The board listens, but then turns the lights off, closes the door, and nothing changes. OSU continues to play the games behind the scenes while putting on a front to the public of caring. Stop it. Please just stop it. I was abused by Dr. Richard Strauss during a medical exam in January of 1995 while I was a student at OSU. At the time, I had no way of knowing the pain and confusion that I felt upon leaving that exam room that day. It was a direct result of decades-long cover-up of scores of Ohio State officials with the knowledge of Strauss's predation. I filed a complaint with Student Health Services. So I want to show you the complaint because I want you to see the words. I'm sorry. I want you to see the words that I felt uncomfortable, that he pressed his erection against me, and that, I'm sorry, that I couldn't even look him in the eye. That's 1995. That's a complaint from 1995 on letterhead, OSU letterhead that your employer wrote. So basically, I filed a complaint. So I was asked to directly confront Dr. Strauss, who yelled at me in a 2-hour meeting with him and then Director of Student Health Services, Dr. Ted Grace. And it's important that I say his name. I want people to hear his name. At that meeting, Strauss denied wrongdoing, and Grace reflectively took Strauss's side. I was told by your staff that I was confused and mistaken about what had happened. Grace later lied to me, saying that no one had ever complained about Strauss before, that he'd had only positive comments. And again, I want you to see that on camera. That's your letterhead. And that's his comments right there that says that nobody's ever complained before. It had only positive comments. And I want you to see his name, Dr. Ted Grace from OSU. Lied to me. It's important for me, for the board, to see this stuff in person, in public. So he told me that they'd had only positive comments. In a follow-up phone call, I demanded that changes be made so that no other students would ever experience what I had gone through in that exam room. Even to this day, OSU has not honored that demand. I'd also requested to be notified if any similar complaint was made in the future, and that Grace would document our conversation and the demand for the changes that I'd made. In 2018, and this is what I want you to hear, the Board of Trustees, in 2018, I made a request under public records law that you produce any documentation of my interactions with Strauss and Grace back in 1995. OSU stalled, and they just ignored me illegally. Behind the scenes, OSU had located that documentation and just decided not to give it to me. For 155 days, you ignored me. That's you now, OSU of today. I know this because I sent you, the board, an email saying that you were breaking the law and stalling illegally. And I want the public to see the email that I sent you. Your address is right up here. The Board of Trustees, Dr. Drake, and everybody, that I told you that what you were doing was illegal. You never responded. You just ignored it. But the Court of Claims did respond that OSU broke the law by withholding that public information. But here's what I want to know now. Who's accountable for that? The Ohio Court of Claims found that every one of OSU's excuses that they made for not producing that documentation in current day, 2018, in a timely manner, including the supposed re-fear of re-traumatization of survivors with the release of the document I, a survivor, specifically asked to see, had no legal merit. The most insulting part of this is that OSU tried to justify their actions in court by manipulatively saying that they didn't want to piecemeal release information to me, a survivor, that could be damaging to other survivors due to the trauma, that it could influence our memories and it could make us reluctant to come forward and it could have a chilling effect on us. Those are the things you told the court. But here's your main problem, that even as you withheld my complaint illegally, you did, as a university, decide to release Strauss's personnel file to the public. You piecemeal released that, containing exemplary reviews saying nothing that was known about sexual abuse. What did you think of that releasing that file did to survivors like me? I want you to stop and think about that. What do you think that that did to us? I can tell you it made the public doubt us, but maybe that was your intention. You can't have it both ways here, OSU. So you told the court that, you did that other action that's completely opposite. Who's accountable for all this stuff? The problem is nobody. Nobody's accountable, just like it was when Strauss was here. That's why I said you really need to listen as a board that this is going to happen again. If OSU was truly concerned about not re-traumatizing students, it wouldn't have enabled Strauss's predation for decades. Learning about OSU's widespread cover-up and known predation has been excruciatingly traumatizing. Every response from OSU since its behavior has been brought to light has been traumatizing. While survivors have bravely come forward to tell the truth, OSU continued to deny us justice and the healing we deserve. We're still waiting for OSU to do right by us today. And each day that goes by without this happening is re-traumatizing for us who were abused on OSU's watch, and a signal to parents of today that you just don't care. OSU continues not to codify any policy changes and to ensure that a serial sex abuser can never thrive again at OSU. OSU's Sexual Abuse Task Force, I'm glad you brought that up, a task force that OSU explicitly prevented survivors from Strauss abuse from being on, just did release a report. But actually, it was more or less a summary of a couple of Zoom presentations to the committee, with no policy changes or recommendation for changes at OSU. And until policy changes are adopted, all that's missing from OSU is another Richard Strauss. OSU is also re-traumatizing survivors like me by providing compensation to some survivors that's a small fraction of what it provided to survivors in similar institutional cover-ups of serial sexual abuse, including Michigan State and Penn State. The scale and length of OSU's cover-up far exceeds anything that happened at Michigan State and Penn State is something that everybody should understand. And that makes OSU's refusal to compensate survivors appropriately even more shocking. Even today, there are countless other survivors that have been dismissed, including me, who've received zero compensation or justice from OSU and no policy change, nothing. If OSU wants to continue to stop re-traumatizing survivors, here's what needs to happen. Come clean, fully clean about what you knew, when you knew it, what you failed to do, acknowledge the painful truths that have been told by the survivors and are being told by us, adopt and implement policy reforms to ensure that this never happens again, offer true justice and healing and appropriate compensation to those whose trauma you have caused, and prove to us that you are new OSU, not the OSU of the past. This will take a lot more than just words and PR campaigns. Until each one of these things has been done, you cannot claim this shameful chapter is behind you. Until this truth is told and justice is done and survivors are fully and fairly compensated for decades of anguish, you'll just continue re-traumatizing us. And please don't think by giving us a very limited time to explain our trauma to you in a very controlled atmosphere once a year to call out everything that you have not done since the year before changes anything. If we were your kids, everything would be different. I just want to say that, you told us that we could speak today and that you wouldn't speak and you were here to listen. And I'm telling you, you're not listening. You haven't been listening. For years, you haven't been listening. Stop pretending to listen and hear these people crying out to you. Now I'd like to introduce my friend. I say friend, Mike Schick, but I shouldn't even know Mike. But don't get me wrong, I'm glad we were friends, but damn, what a thing to have in common. Mike?
Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. Yeah, this is hard. This isn't easy to do, and this is my third time, but I appreciate you guys allowing me to speak. If you guys don't remember me, I am a former wrestler from 1988 to 1993. I was a two-time All-American, and I was a volunteer coach from 93 to 96 as I was going through graduate school, and I was one of Dr. Richard Strauss's victims. We are 2 years removed from my first time speaking in front of this board. I thought, maybe I'd give a recap and highlight a few key facts from this case and give you an update as to how my last 2 years has affected me. Fact number one, The Ohio State University employed Dr. Richard Strauss, a serial sexual predator, and allowed him access and exposure to your students and your student athletes. I was one of those student athletes. My abuse went on for 8 years, and I, like many others, including all of my wrestling teammates, faced him daily. He was our team doctor. And if you guys aren't all aware, I think I shared this with you at one of the other meetings, that he had a personal locker within our wrestling locker room. And coincidentally, his locker was right next to mine. Dr. Strauss groomed every one of us daily by showering with us, by sitting in the sauna with us every day, and chumming around with us like he was just one of the guys. And to this day, I'm still not sure why he was ever granted a locker within our locker room. Fact number two, the Ohio State University paid for a so-called independent investigation by Perkins Coie that cost $6.2 million. What it showed was the widespread knowledge within the university of what Dr. Richard Strauss was doing and to the extent to which OSU covered it up. In addition, the report brought to light to all victims the depth of the abuse that we were unaware of. Had the knowledge been brought to light when it should have 30 to 40 years ago, we would have had a better understanding of our own course of action and possibly avoided our own abuse. All victims did not know or even understand the magnitude to the widespread abuse by Dr. Strauss. At the time of our abuse, we were made to believe what was happening was common medical practice and necessary. That's why we all dealt with it the way we did. We all knew what we experienced was real and wrong. And guess what? Your investigation confirmed this and confirmed the knowledge and concealment within the university of all of Dr. Strauss's abuse. Fact number three, in May of 2019, President Drake sent all victims a letter stating it was releasing publicly the independent investigation report from Perkins Coie regarding Dr. Richard Strauss. He says a few things that stand out to me in this letter. Number one, the findings are shocking and painful to comprehend. Number two, on behalf of this university, we offer our profound regret and sincere apologies to each person who endured Strauss's abuse and for the university's fundamental failure at the time to prevent this abuse. Number three, the independent investigators concluded that Strauss committed acts of sexual abuse against 177 students during his employment at OSU. Let me interject with this. 177 students are just the tip of the iceberg because they're the ones that reached out to Perkins Coie. There have been reports showing Dr. Strauss sexually abused over 1,500 students. Plus, if you combine all the victims that have come forward within all lawsuits, there are over 350 more and counting. I addressed this board in November 2018. It was my first time. And after the conclusion of the meeting, President Drake came around the table to me and addressed me before anyone else. He shook my hand and thanked me for my courage to speak up. Well, apologized again. Sorry. And promised to make this right. Those were his words. It was 2 years ago. Sorry. Fact number 4. After that Board of Trustees meeting, within hours, OSU filed to dismiss our case based on the statute of limitations having passed again. So window dressing to create a public perception that you all are working in good faith to do the right thing for all your students, but behind closed doors so the public won't see, you're doing just the opposite. Forgive me, sorry. We keep hearing this word, restorative justice. This is what the university continues to say it is working towards, that OSU of today is different than the OSU of old. How? Again, you allowed a sexual predator to roam your campus, abusing student athletes for 20 years, knew about it, did nothing, and concealed it. But today, even after an investigation, after apologizing and taking responsibility, you are continuing to be bold enough to ask a judge to throw this case out. That's not restorative justice. Fact number 6, here's the OSU of old, the abuse by your doctor on your students for 20 years are as follows. And these are uncomfortable to say, but I gotta put it out there. Anal rape, digital penetration, masturbation, and masturbation with the intent to arouse, genital groping and touching, and voyeurism. And I fall in many of those categories, believe it or not. Could you imagine if this was one of your own kids? Could you imagine a week after dropping a kid off at the university, he was sexually abused by a team doctor? That's what happened to me. I welcome you all to have a conversation with my parents and see how they feel about it. Think about this as well. The Perkins-Coie investigation uncovered multiple complaints about Dr. Strauss's sexual abuse as early as his first year on campus in 1979. But these complaints weren't elevated beyond the athletics department or student health until 1996. 2 years later, after voluntarily retiring, and here's the kicker, Strauss received emeritus status that this board approved. This is the OSU of old. So what about the OSU of today? Fact number 7, the abuse of this university from 1979 to 1998 is the greatest, and as the most recent Sports Illustrated article labeled it, the most sweeping sex abuse scandal in the history of American higher education. Knowing this fact, however, is the Ohio State University of today any different than the Ohio State of old? Here's the Ohio State of today. The damages being caused today by this university's lack of compassion, this university's lack of fairness, this university's lack of honesty and truthfulness, this university's delay tactics. As I said, many of us have been dealing with this for 3 years. The university's arrogant attorneys who continue to push as many victims as possible to settle for as little as possible, and this board's lack of action are as follows. Depression and anxiety, self-medication through drugs and alcohol, family issues, trust issues, divorce, ruined relationships, lost wages due to lost job, suicide attempt, health issues, heart attack, loss of quality of life, and social ridicule. These are just to name a few, and I probably could list many more. Why are these things happening? Many, including myself, are now processing our abuse as older adults. We all see how our lives ricocheted in different directions because of Dr. Strauss. But here's the thing. Additional damages are being caused because our beloved university and the people trying to protect its brand are not seeing to its former students and student athletes with their best interests at hand. Let me give you a few examples if I can. And this is fact number 8. In March of this year, I was at the state wrestling championships coaching my son at the state finals and my team. At this time, I learned a settlement was imminent for one of our groups within this case, which this board approved. I was excited to hear that this university was finally going to validate the damage and harm done to all victims and finally allow many to move forward to heal. What I found is 162 victims settled for $40.9 million. I did not understand the settlement given the magnitude of the abuse and the fact this university knew about the abuse and did nothing. What it told me was my abuse as a male was less damaging than that of a female. We have the Larry Nassar Michigan State gymnastics case to reference and compare. The reparations for harm done to all 162 victims pales in comparison to that of Larry Nassar's victims. So here's my question. Why do you feel the damage that Dr. Strauss did to us is any different than what Larry Nassar did to the girls of MSU? Is being a female make it more acceptable? Do I need to reread the sexual abuse list that I had written above? What was done to each of us was no different, and the damage and harm is no different. Within the last few months, 24 more victims were pushed to settle. Yes, pushed to settle, I say. So in total to date, 185 victims have settled for roughly $46.7 million. I mentioned I heard the first settlement came the first week in March. Just a week before, or a week or so before, this board approved a 3-year contract extension for its head football coach, Ryan Day. The numbers are staggering, and if the contract is seen through in its entirety through 2026, total compensation is above $50 million. And I believe this board agreed to contributing $1 million to his retirement account, which will go in on December 31st of this year. So optics show one man's future earnings is more important than the compensation of 185 victims for this school's negligence. Regarding Coach Day, my comments are not to highlight whether he should be afforded a salary this large. I'm a big fan of Coach Day. The wage span for this position and precedent dictates this salary, just like the Michigan State girls gymnastics case dictates what every victim in our case should be afforded. Gender should not matter. So what can this board do today? What are you willing to commit to stop these ongoing problems and provide closure? When the Big Ten decided to cancel football this season, I'm sure this board played a pivotal role in getting that overturned. When you saw the need to lock Coach Day in for 3 additional years, you did. Our case demands your attention. Your former students and student athletes demand your attention. I know if you so desired, you could end the continued suffering of your former athletes. And here's the last fact, and I please, if you can, this abuse I got from your team doctor for 8 years did damage to me. A lot of ways. Divorce, ruined relationships, depression, anxiety, lost job and lost wages, trust issues, family issues. And my story is not singular. You need to understand that this board's inaction and the university's constant demand to have our case thrown out of court is causing more and more damage by the day. So here's another question. What's the difference between the OSU of old versus the OSU of today? The OSU of old turned its back on all its students and student athletes for 20 years. The OSU of old did not listen to or take seriously the abuse, wow, sorry, I'm getting a little teary-eyed here. Didn't take seriously the abuse claims 30 to 40 years ago. The OSU of old allowed its students and student athletes to be sexually abused through Dr. Strauss's entire tenure at OSU and covered it up. Again, the Ohio State University of old did nothing. The OSU of today, and here's the OSU of today. You guys have all the facts. Your investigation brought to light all of Dr. Strauss's transgressions, as well as the university's transgressions. Before the Perkins Coie report, this university publicly tried to make all victims out to be liars. As Steve said, even released clean files of Dr. Strauss to support those claims. You had a president of this university apologize to what the OSU of old did. The OSU of today continues to approach its restitution to all victims with caution and delay tactics, so to supposedly not to re-traumatize us. But at the same time, the OSU of today has continued to ask a judge to throw our case out, and this is re-traumatizing at its max. The OSU of today feeds the media with their so-called fair settlements to publicly sway the perception they're doing the right thing. What is being offered is not even close to being fair. So I'm going to end with this. You know, we came here today asking for a platform to tell our stories. I've been fortunate enough to be granted the right to speak for the third time where others weren't. You know, we wanted to share a video where multiple victims and victims' family members shared how Dr. Strauss's abuse has affected their lives and how the OSU of today's handling of the case has affected their lives. I have stated numerous times that you cannot understand the harm that was done to victims until you hear their stories. I hope to God you guys watch the video. You know, my best friend's on there giving his story. My friend Al gave his story. I don't really know what else to say to you guys. You know, this is my third time. I just hope that you guys do the right thing and do what's fair and do it quickly. I don't want to be here again for a fourth time, but I will. I'll come back. You know, with that said, the next person that's going to speak is Nick Nutter. Nick Nutter was a teammate of mine. Nick Nutter was someone that I had the fortune of coaching as a volunteer coach. He was an All-American, and his abuse is no different than mine or the others. So Nick, have at it.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. First off, I'd like to thank the board for allowing me to share my experience. A little background. My name is Nick Nutter. I was an Ohio State wrestler from 1992 to 1997. In that time frame, I received many accolades and believe I represented the Ohio State University to the best of my ability. And I assume you would have been proud of my athletics and academic accolades. In my time at the Ohio State University, I was a scholar athlete. I was a 1996 All-American wrestler. I also won 2 national titles and a runner-up in the college division of the freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling. And by the grace of God, I placed 3rd place at the 1996 U.S. Olympic trials for Greco-Roman wrestling. I come to you today to let you know that I enjoyed my time at Ohio State quite a bit. And in hindsight, I would do it all over again. I am to this day, at the moment, a true Buckeye. I cheer every week for every sport that Ohio State competes in. In my time while wrestling was fun, but we all know at this point that there were some negative experiences. Dr. Richard Strauss, whose locker was 2 to 4 away from mine. I can't remember exactly, but I do remember multiple times when he was putting his underwear on that he accidentally bumped me with his bare behind for over 5+ years. It was seemed like a daily mistake that he made. And that is the tip of the iceberg too. And I don't have time to go into details of crazier episodes that I've had with Strauss, but that is the most benign thing that's ever happened. And the other thing is Larkins Hall in general. This to me is obvious, and we don't need to go into details of the deviancy that went on there. My frustration today is that I've had the worst 3 years of my life since I shared my experiences about the abuse we suffered at Ohio State. I was under the impression that the truth shall set you free, but in my experience, it is not. I'm more disappointed with Ohio State now than I was when Dr. Strauss was employed there. I know many people back then wanted help, but they were silenced by the powers that be. And I know many of you guys weren't there at that time. So I don't blame you guys for that. We now have the opportunity to right the situation. But in my opinion, OSU is more deviant than they were in the university of 20 years ago. I feel you speak with a forked tongue. You say that we will make this right and brag to the public about how you are working for mediation, but in my opinion, you're not. I've been open and transparent about the past and would love to share my story to the world, but you ask us to remain silent and you will take care of it, but you're not. In fact, you tell the public that you are doing a great job at mediating, but in reality, you boast about settling with 160 some John Does. There are many people out there in the public's eyes who are willing to tell their story and would love to share details, but I feel you do not want to hear them. Since I started this journey, I too believe that Ohio State is not the same OSU of the past and that things will get better. But I feel you are worse than the OSU of the past. You have hamstrung our voices and stories and tell the public how much you have changed, but I can assure you that things have not gotten any better for any of us in the last 3 years. You preach restorative justice to the public, but we're in court and you're trying to throw us out with statute of limitations. We were called liars and we're trying to be silenced, but the Perkins-Coie investigation said that we have merit. President Drake sent all of us letters apologizing and admitting that Ohio State wronged us. So again, why are you trying to throw us out in court? I don't get that. Listed as one of OSU's values is the value of integrity, transparency, and trust. Let's break that down. Integrity, I believe you failed. You're actively trying to dismiss over 250 sexually abused victims out of court. Transparency, I feel you failed. You've kept public records from many of us, Stephen, and rationalize it with, we are just trying to protect us from further harm. That's a very godlike thing to do, that you know better than the people wanting to put closure in their life, but you're going to protect us. I feel that transparency was a fail. And trust, lastly, is a fail, in my opinion. OSU knew about the sexual abuse. They concealed the sexual abuse. They covered up the sexual abuse. They shredded evidence of sexual abuse, and you are now actively trying to throw us out of court. In what world are your students or athletes supposed to trust you? I'm getting close to the end here. My health has deteriorated in the last 3 years as I deal with this situation, and I just want to move past it, honestly. Like everybody else echoed, we want this to be over with. I know many of my brothers have had depression, divorce, anxiety, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, suicide attempts, and health issues. These issues in our group have skyrocketed in the last 3 years. Most recently, an Olympian, a world champion, and a national champion for the Ohio State University just suffered a heart attack. At the moment, it appears to me that you think the right thing to do is brag about settling with one touch, maybe, John Doe's, and then hiding behind law. Please quit stalling and spinning the situation and do the right thing. I really ask you that in humility. Sexual abuse and rape are horrible things that hurt you both mentally and physically. But what hurts me more is the pain of betrayal. I experienced betrayal with the University of the Old, and I'm still feeling the pain of betrayal with the University of today. I wish you guys loved us as much as we loved you. Once again, thank you for allowing my voice to be heard. I'm very, very grateful. Thank you again, Nick Nutter.
Sorry about that. I needed to unmute. Gentlemen, thank you for coming and sharing your presentation with us today. Again, we appreciate your willingness to speak with us. And as President Johnson said, we are listening very carefully. And I appreciate your time. And we will now, the board will now take a brief recess. And during this time, we will once again share on screen the details of how to access the various support resources that are available. For all the trustees and to our live stream viewers, please plan to reconvene in 5 minutes. Thanks again, gentlemen.